Please stop! She's awake!
Stop! Don't touch me. You're bleeding. I have to help. You don't understand, Nkemdili. If you touch me, you'll die. What are you saying? You're scaring me. Look at the river. It's moving again. That's not possible. It's not the river. It's her. She's awake. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed and let me know in the comments what you'd do if love itself became a curse. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll feel this one in your soul. What if every woman you ever loved died the moment you touched them? They called him cursed. But what if the curse was the only thing keeping something far worse asleep? The mist clung to the village of Ukara like a widow's veil. It was the kind of place where time moved differently, where the old gods still whispered through the leaves of the Iroko trees, and where the river ran dark even under the brightest moon. The villagers had learned long ago not to question what they could not see, only to respect it. And so, when Tobechukwu Okorie returned after 14 years abroad, they respected him from a distance. He arrived on a Thursday morning in a convoy of black vehicles that seemed too clean, too modern for the red clay roads. 34 years old, tall, immaculately dressed. His eyes carried the weight of a man who had built empires but had never found home. The villagers watched from doorways and market stalls as he stepped out, his Italian shoes sinking slightly into the earth that had birthed him. They did not rush to greet him. They did not cheer. They whispered. "The prodigal son returns," old Mama Nwankwo muttered, adjusting the wrapper around her waist. "But what does he bring with him?" "Money," someone answered. "Money?" She spat into the dust. "Money can't buy peace. Look at his eyes. That man carries darkness." And she was right. Tobechukwu moved through his late father's estate like a ghost haunting his own life. The mansion had been rebuilt, modernized, glass and marble rising where thatch and clay once stood. But no amount of renovation could erase what lingered in the walls. At night, he dreamed. Always the same dream. He would be standing in water, waist deep, and when he looked down, his legs were no longer his own. Scales, green and black, coiling, moving independently. And when he tried to scream, his voice came out as a hiss. He would wake drenched in sweat, his chest heaving, his hands trembling as they traced his own skin, searching for something that wasn't there in the light. The villagers noticed things. Dogs that once barked joyfully now whimpered and cowered when he passed. A young woman who sold tomatoes at the market fainted after serving him, her body seizing, foam at her lips. 3 days later, she was dead. The elders said it was malaria, but the younger ones knew better. "He's marked," they said, "chosen by something. Cursed." The word followed him like a shadow. One evening, as Tobechukwu stood in his study, pouring whiskey he would not drink, he caught his reflection in the window. For just a moment, the glass rippled like water disturbed by something beneath the surface. He blinked. It was still again. But his hand shook. The next morning, the village priest arrived unannounced. Father Okeke was a small man with a large presence. His white cassock somehow always spotless despite the mud. He did not sit when offered a chair. He stood in the doorway, clutching his rosary, his eyes fixed on Tobechukwu with something between pity and fear. "The river goddess never forgets a broken vow," the priest said quietly. Tobechukwu laughed. It was a hollow sound. "I've broken no vows, Father. I don't even believe in river goddesses. Your mother did." The laughter died in his throat. Father Okeke stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She came to the river 35 years ago. Barren, desperate, she made a bargain she could not keep. And you, my son, Are the price still being paid? Before Tobachukwu could respond, the priest turned and walked away, his sandals slapping against the marble floor, leaving only the scent of incense and dread. That night, Tobachukwu stood before his bathroom mirror, shirt off, studying himself. His body was perfect, sculpted, unmarked. But as he turned, he thought he saw something, a flicker of movement beneath his skin, like muscles shifting in a pattern that didn't belong to any human anatomy. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, it was gone. But the hissing in his ears remained. Her name was Nkemdili, and she arrived in Ukara on a mission, not a pilgrimage. She was a doctor, 30 years old, trained in Lagos, experienced in crisis zones, and utterly unimpressed by wealth or superstition. She had set up a free clinic in the village square, a simple tent with folding tables and donated supplies, and within days she had treated more people than the local dispensary had seen in months. She was beautiful in a way that didn't ask for attention, but commanded it anyway. Her hair was natural, pulled back in a bun that revealed the sharp elegance of her face. Her voice was calm, steady, the kind that made frightened children stop crying and stubborn elders listen. And she had no patience for nonsense. So when Tobachukwu Okori walked into her clinic on a Wednesday afternoon, flanked by 2 assistants, clearly expecting deference, she didn't even look up from the child she was examining. "Wait your turn," she said simply. One of the assistants sputtered, "Do you know who this is?" "A man with 2 working legs who can stand in line like everyone else." Tobachukwu smiled for the first time in weeks. He waved his assistants away and sat on a plastic chair meant for patients, his expensive suit looking absurd against the poverty around him. He waited. When she finally approached him an hour later, she crossed her arms. "You're not sick. What do you want?" "To donate," he said. "Equipment, supplies, whatever you need." "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "Because I can." She studied him with eyes that seemed to see through the rehearsed generosity, down to the loneliness beneath. "Guilt money doesn't heal people, Mr. Okori. It just makes the giver feel better." "Then what does heal people, doctor?" "Presence, consistency, actually giving a damn beyond the photo opportunity." She turned to walk away, but he stood, his voice stopping her. "I'm trying to give a damn. I just don't know how anymore." There was something in his tone, raw and unguarded, that made her pause. She looked back at him, and for a moment, the billionaire facade cracked, revealing the exhausted man underneath. "Then start by listening," she said softly. "The village doesn't need a savior. It needs a son." And with that, she returned to her patients, leaving him standing there, something stirring in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Over the following weeks, Tobachukwu began to change. He came to the clinic not with cameras or crowds, but quietly in the early mornings, carrying supplies himself. He sat with the elders, listening to their stories. He funded the repair of the village school without a plaque bearing his name. He walked the red roads at dawn, letting the earth remember his feet. And he found himself drawn, again and again, to Nkemdili. She fascinated him, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was unmoved by the things that had defined his entire adult life. Money meant nothing to her. Power even less. She cared about sick children and clean water and whether the rains would come on time. She made him feel human again. One evening after the clinic closed, he found her sitting by the river, her feet dangling in the water, her eyes watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and blood. He sat beside her without asking permission. "You're persistent," she said, not looking at him. "You're worth being persistent for." She finally turned, studying his face with that same piercing attention she gave her patients. Why me, Tobechukwu? You could have any woman. Models, socialites, women who'd kill for your last name. Because you don't want it, he said simply. And because when you look at me, you don't see a curse. Her expression shifted, something like concern crossing her features. Should I? He wanted to tell her about the dreams, the rippling mirrors, the women who had died, but the words stuck in his throat, fear and shame tangling together. So instead, he reached for her hand. The moment their skin touched, a sound split the air, low, guttural, a hiss that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Nkemdili jerked her hand back, eyes wide. What was that? The river, Tobechukwu said quickly, his heart hammering. Just the river. But they both knew rivers didn't hiss. That night, Tobechukwu lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince himself to stay away from her. For her safety, for her life. But the heart is a stubborn thing, and loneliness is a powerful hunger. They began to spend more time together, carefully, cautiously, like two people walking through a minefield, each step measured, each moment aware of the danger that neither fully acknowledged. He took her to dinner at his mansion. She wore a simple dress the color of the sunset, and when she walked through the door, the lights flickered. Just for a second, but enough for the house staff to exchange nervous glances. They ate on the terrace under strings of lights, the village spread out below them like a blanket of stars. Tell me about your mother, Nkemdili said, her voice gentle. Tobechukwu's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Why? Because you never mention her. And in a place like this, where ancestors matter more than the living, that silence is loud. He set down his fork. She died when I was 7. Drowned in the river. I'm sorry. Don't be. I barely remember her. It was a lie, and they both knew it. What I remember are the stories. The villagers said she was desperate for a child, that she went to the river goddess and made a bargain. What kind of bargain? He met her eyes. The kind you can't break without consequences. The wind picked up suddenly, carrying with it the scent of water and something older, something that smelled like blood and earth and ancient promises. Nkemdili shivered despite the warm night. You don't believe in that, do you? She asked. Curses and goddesses and bargains? Tobechukwu wanted to say no, wanted to laugh it off like he had with the priest, but sitting there, with this woman he was falling for, despite every warning in his gut, he couldn't lie. I don't know what I believe anymore, he whispered, but I know I dream of scales, and I know that every woman I've ever loved has died. The words hung in the air like a confession and a warning. Nkemdili reached across the table, her hand covering his. Then it's a good thing I'm hard to kill. And despite everything, despite the hissing that had started again in his ears, despite the way the lights flickered faster now, he laughed. A real laugh. For the first time in years. But that night, after she left, he stood in his bedroom and removed his shirt. The mirror reflected his body. And for a moment, everything was normal. Just skin and muscle and the architecture of a man. Then the skin moved, not like breathing, like something underneath was shifting, coiling, rearranging itself. And for just a heartbeat, he saw them, scales, green and black and shimmering with an iridescence that belonged to no human being. He stumbled backward, crashing into the dresser, his breath coming in panicked gasps. When he looked again, they were gone. But the hissing continued. Nkemdili couldn't sleep that night. She lay in the small room she rented above the clinic, staring at the ceiling, trying to rationalize what she felt. She was a woman of science, of evidence, of things that could be tested and measured and explained. But something about Tobachukwu defied explanation. The way animals reacted to him. The way the air seemed to thicken when he entered a room. The way her own instincts, usually so reliable, screamed contradictory warnings, run and stay, danger and safety, all at once. She thought about the hissing by the river, the flickering lights. The way his eyes sometimes caught the light at an angle that made them look almost reptilian. No, she was being ridiculous. But the next morning, when she arrived at the clinic, Mama Nwankwo was waiting for her. The old woman's face was grave. She grabbed Nkemdili's wrist with surprising strength, pulling her aside, away from the gathering patients. "You need to stay away from that man," Mama Nwankwo hissed. "Mr. Okori, he's been nothing but helpful." "Helpful?" The old woman's laugh was bitter. "Child, do you know why his mother died? He said she drowned. She drowned because the river took her. Payment for a debt she couldn't pay." Mama Nwankwo's grip tightened. She wanted a child so badly. She went to the old shrine, the one we don't speak of anymore, and she begged the river goddess, begged for a son, for wealth, for power. "That's just superstition." "Is it?" The old woman's eyes were fierce. "Then explain why that boy was born during an eclipse. Why his first cry sounded like a serpent's hiss. Why his mother's body was found with 2 puncture wounds on her thigh, drained of blood like something had fed on her from the inside." And Nkemdili felt ice creep down her spine. "You're saying—" "I'm saying that child was never meant to be. He's a vessel, girl. And the river goddess doesn't give gifts. She makes exchanges. His mother traded her life, her soul, everything for that boy. And what lives inside him has been hungry ever since." And Nkemdili pulled her hand free. "I don't believe in fairy tales." "Then believe in bodies, doctor, because you're not the first woman to get close to him. 3 years ago, there was a woman from Port Harcourt, beautiful, educated. She came to visit him during Christmas. They spent 3 nights together. On the 4th morning, she was found dead in his bed. No marks, no explanation, just dead, empty, like something had hollowed her out from the inside. The old woman leaned closer, her breath smelling of bitter herbs. "The man you're falling for doesn't just carry darkness, child. He is darkness. And if you lie with him, if you let him inside you in any way, the serpent will wake, and you will die." Mama Nwankwo walked away, leaving Nkemdili standing in the morning sun, her hands trembling, her mind racing. She wanted to dismiss it, wanted to laugh it off as village superstition born from isolation and fear. But that night, when Tobachukwu came to see her, she found herself watching him differently. The way he moved, fluid and graceful. The way his tongue flickered when he laughed, just slightly, like a taste of the air. The way his pupils, in the right light, seemed to narrow vertically. "Is something wrong?" he asked, noticing her staring. "No," she lied. "Just tired." But when he leaned in to kiss her goodnight, when his lips were inches from hers, she heard it again. That hiss. And this time, she was certain. It came from him. The storm came 3 nights later. It wasn't a natural storm. The sky had been clear one moment, stars scattered like diamonds. And then suddenly, the clouds rolled in, black and heavy and roiling with something that looked almost alive. Lightning split the sky in jagged gold, and the river began to glow. Actually glow, a phosphorescent green that turned the water into something otherworldly, something that didn't belong to this realm. The villagers locked their doors. Parents pulled their children inside. Fires were extinguished. Prayers were whispered in Igbo, the old language, the one the gods still understood. And through the storm, walking barefoot in the mud, came the oracle. She was ancient. No one knew exactly how old. Her name was Adaze, though few dared to speak it aloud. Her eyes were filmed with cataracts, but she saw more than any sighted person. Her body was bent and fragile, but her presence filled the air with a weight that made grown men kneel. She went directly to Nkemdili's room. No knock. The door simply opened, and the old woman stood there, water running from her white hair, her cloth wrapper plastered to her thin frame. Nkemdili sat up in bed, fear and awe twisting in her chest. "Come," the oracle said simply. It wasn't a request. Nkemdili followed. They walked through the storm, through the village, down the muddy path to the riverbank, where the water still glowed with that unnatural light. Other villagers had gathered at a distance, watching, afraid to come closer but unable to look away. At the water's edge, the oracle turned to Nkemdili, her clouded eyes somehow seeing everything. "You love him," the oracle said. Not a question. A fact. I don't know. Lies taste bitter on the wind, child. You love him, and that love will kill you." Nkemdili's voice shook. "What is he?" "He is what his mother made him. A vessel, a prison, and a weapon." The oracle raised one gnarled hand, pointing toward Tobechukwu's mansion on the hill, where lights blazed despite the storm. The river goddess gave his mother what she wanted: a son, wealth, power. But power always has a price. The goddess placed part of herself inside that child, a serpent spirit, ancient, hungry, bound to his flesh until death. "Why?" Nkemdili whispered. "Why would she do that?" "Because his mother promised her something in return, a sacrifice, a life for a life. But when the time came to pay, his mother ran. She tried to hide her son. She tried to break the bargain." The oracle's voice dropped to a whisper. "So the goddess took her instead, dragged her into the river, made her part of the water forever. But the serpent remained in the boy, waiting, growing, feeding on every woman he dared to love." "That's impossible." "Is it?" The oracle stepped closer, her breath cold despite the humid night. "Have you not felt it? When he touches you, when he looks at you with hunger in his eyes, that is not just desire. Child, that is the serpent recognizing prey." Nkemdili wanted to run, wanted to deny everything. But deep down, in the part of her that was older than logic, older than medicine, she knew. She had felt it every time. "The man you love carries the serpent of the river," the oracle intoned, her voice rising above the wind and rain. "If he lies with you, if he takes you into his body or lets you into his, the serpent will consume you. It will feed on your essence, your spirit, your very life. And you will die before dawn, empty and cold, another sacrifice to a bargain made before you were born." Lightning struck close, illuminating the oracle's face in stark white relief. "Stay away from him," she commanded, "or join the others at the bottom of the river." Then the old woman turned and walked back into the storm, leaving Nkemdili standing alone at the water's edge, tears mixing with rain, her heart breaking and terrified in equal measure. She looked up at the mansion on the hill, and she knew. She couldn't stay away. Love doesn't obey warnings. Tobechukwu knew she had been told. He saw it in her eyes the next day when she came to him, rain-soaked and exhausted, her face a mask of fear and determination. They stood in his study. The door closed. The rest of the world shut out. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't insult her by pretending not to understand. "Yes." The single word hung between them like a guillotine blade. "Show me. Nkemdili, show me." His hands trembled as he unbuttoned his shirt. He turned his back to her, and for a moment there was nothing. Just the smooth, perfect skin of a man who took care of himself. Then he closed his eyes, stopped fighting it, let the thing inside him rise to the surface. The skin rippled, scales emerged, green and black and iridescent, starting at his spine and spreading outward like a living tattoo. They covered his back, his shoulders, moving, shifting, breathing with their own life. Nkemdili gasped, stumbling backward. "Oh, God. It's been inside me since birth," Tobachukwu said quietly, his voice thick with shame. "A piece of the river goddess, a serpent spirit bound to my flesh. I've tried everything. Priests, doctors, traditional healers. Nothing works. Because it's not a disease or a possession. It's part of me, woven into my DNA." He turned to face her, and she could see the anguish in his eyes, the years of isolation and fear and self-loathing. "I've loved 3 women in my life," he continued, his voice breaking. 3. The first was in university, beautiful, smart, kind. We spent one night together. She died in her sleep. The doctors said heart failure, but I knew. I felt the serpent wake. Felt it feed. Tears streamed down his face now. Years of grief finally finding release. The second was a woman I met in London. I thought distance would change things. Thought maybe the curse wouldn't follow me across the ocean. We lasted 2 months. 2 beautiful months. Then one night, we made love, and I felt it again. That hunger. That pull. She died in my arms, doctor. Looked at me with such confusion, such betrayal, as the life drained from her eyes. And the third, Nkemdili whispered, never made it past a kiss. She collapsed, died 3 days later. That's when I stopped trying. Stopped believing I could ever have what other men take for granted. Love, touch, intimacy. Because I'm not a man, Nkemdili. I'm a walking grave. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Nkemdili spoke, her voice steady despite the fear. There has to be a way to break it. There isn't. There has to be. I've searched for 20 years, Tobachukwu shouted, his control finally shattering. Do you think I haven't tried? Do you think I want to be this? A monster wearing a man's face? You're not a monster. Then what am I? She crossed the space between them, taking his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You're a man carrying something he didn't choose, something forced on him by someone else's desperation. But you're still a man, and I won't let that thing take you without a fight. Nkemdili, you need to walk away. Forget me. Find someone who can actually love you without killing you. What if I don't want someone else? Then you're a fool. She smiled sadly. Maybe. Or maybe love is just another word for foolish hope. And before he could stop her, before he could push her away for her own safety, she kissed him. For one perfect, terrible moment, everything was normal. Just 2 people sharing breath and warmth and the electric possibility of connection. Then the hissing started. Louder this time, undeniable, coming from deep inside Tobachukwu's chest, vibrating through his ribs, up his throat. His eyes flew open, and she saw it. Gold. His pupils had turned to vertical slits, reptilian and ancient, glowing with a light that didn't come from any human soul. She pulled back, gasping. Tobachukwu staggered away from her, his hands clutching his chest, his body convulsing. Get out, he gasped. Please, Nkemdili, get out before it. But she didn't run. Instead, she grabbed his hand. Where's the shrine, she demanded. The place where your mother made the bargain? What? The shrine. Where is it? In the forest, past the old Iroko tree. But it's been abandoned for decades. The villagers won't go near it. Then that's where we're going. Are you insane? If we go there, if we invoke the goddess, she could kill us both. Nkemdili's eyes blazed with determination. She could, or we could finally break this curse and give you your life back. Either way, I'm not watching you suffer like this anymore. Tobachukwu stared at her, this impossible woman who should have run screaming, who should have let him die alone as he deserved. And he realized something that terrified him more than the serpent ever had. He loved her, completely, desperately, with every cursed cell in his body. "Okay," he whispered, "let's end this." The forest was older than the village, older than memory, a place where the trees grew so thick that daylight turned to twilight even at noon. The villagers called it Ajo Ophia, the evil forest, and they told their children that anyone who entered without permission never returned. But Tobechukwu and Nkemdili entered anyway. They walked in silence, the only sounds their footsteps on the moss-covered earth and the distant cries of animals that might not have been animals at all. The air grew heavier with each step, thick with humidity and something else. Something that felt like invisible hands pressing against their skin, testing their resolve, warning them to turn back. But they didn't. Finally, they found it. The shrine was small, barely more than a circle of stones surrounding a crumbling altar. Vines had overtaken most of it, and the carved images of the river goddess had been weathered almost smooth. But the power remained. It vibrated in the air like a struck bell, ancient and patient and aware. At the center of the circle was a pool of water, perfectly still, reflecting the canopy above like dark glass. Nkemdili shivered. "Now what?" Tobechukwu stepped forward, his voice shaking. "I don't know. The stories never said how to break a bargain, only how to make one." "Then we make a new one," Nkemdili said. "We offer something else, something better than what your mother promised. The goddess doesn't negotiate. She only takes. Then let her try to take me." Before Tobechukwu could stop her, Nkemdili knelt at the pool's edge, her hands hovering over the water. "I am Nkemdili Okafor," she called out, her voice clear and strong. "Daughter of the earth, trained in the ways of healing. I come to this place not to beg, but to offer. The man who bears your mark has suffered enough. His mother's debt is not his. So I offer myself in his place. Take me, but let him go free." "No." Tobechukwu grabbed her shoulders, pulling her back. "Are you insane? She'll kill you." "She's going to kill me anyway," Nkemdili shouted back. "The moment we kiss, the moment we touch, the moment we try to have anything resembling a life together, that serpent will wake up and feed. At least this way, maybe you survive." "I don't want to survive without you." "Then help me fight for both of us." The water in the pool began to ripple, though there was no wind. Then it started to glow, that same phosphorescent green they had seen in the river during the storm. And from the depths, something rose. Not the goddess herself, but a manifestation of her power. A python the size of a man's thigh, glowing with internal light, its scales shimmering with patterns that hurt to look at directly, like staring at a star. It emerged from the water, impossibly long, coiling around the altar, its head rising to regard them with eyes that held the weight of centuries. When it spoke, its voice was not sound but sensation, vibrating directly in their bones. "You dare to renegotiate what was already sworn?" Tobechukwu dropped to his knees. "Please. The bargain wasn't mine. I've paid for it my entire life. Let me go. Your mother promised me a vessel, a body to walk the earth, a bridge between water and land. You are that bridge. Without you, I am bound to the river, unable to touch the world beyond its banks. You are my freedom." "Then take me," Nkemdili said again, stepping forward. "I'll be your vessel, your bridge, whatever you need. Just release him." The serpent's head swiveled to her, studying her with ancient intelligence. "You would trade your freedom for his? Your life for love?" "Yes." "Why?" Nkemdili's voice softened. "Because love is the only thing in this world worth dying for." The serpent was silent for a long moment, and in that silence, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then it laughed, a sound like rocks grinding against each other. "Foolish child. Love is not strength, it is weakness," attachment, chains by another name. Maybe, Nkemdili said, but I'd rather die in chains of my own choosing than live in freedom watching him suffer. The serpent regarded her with something that might have been respect. Then it turned back to Tobechukwu. Your mother was desperate and selfish. She wanted power without cost. But you, the serpent's tongue flickered out, tasting the air around him. You have carried me with honor, though you hated every moment. You have resisted, starved me, kept me dormant through sheer will, and now you would die to save another. The serpent coiled tighter around the altar, its body forming a perfect spiral. The bargain cannot be broken, it said, but it can be transformed. What does that mean? Tobechukwu asked, hope and fear warring in his voice. It means a choice. The serpent must remain bound to flesh, but it does not have to be yours. The eyes swiveled to Nkemdili. She offers herself freely. A rare thing, a powerful thing. If she truly wishes to carry me, I will accept. You will be free, human. You will live and love and die, as all mortals do. Nkemdili stepped forward without hesitation. I accept. No, Tobechukwu grabbed her arm. You don't know what you're agreeing to. The dreams, the isolation, the knowledge that you'll kill anyone you touch. I won't let you do this. She turned to him, cupping his face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. You spent your whole life as a prison for someone else's sin. It's time someone gave you a chance to be free. Not like this. Exactly like this. She kissed his forehead gently. Live for me, Tobechukwu. Find someone who can love you the way you deserve. Have children. Grow old. Be happy. That's how you honor what I'm doing. I can't. You can. You will. She turned back to the serpent, her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. I'm ready. The serpent uncoiled, sliding down from the altar, approaching her with the grace of flowing water. Once it is done, the goddess spoke through the python, there is no reversal. You will carry me until your death. And death will come slowly, human. I am not a merciful passenger. I understand. Then kneel. Nkemdili knelt at the pool's edge, her hands resting on her thighs, her eyes closed, her breath steady, despite the terror coursing through her veins. The serpent raised its head, fangs extending, venom glinting in the strange light. And that's when Tobechukwu made his choice. He threw himself between them. The fangs sank not into Nkemdili's skin, but into his shoulder, deep, tearing, pumping venom and power and ancient rage directly into his bloodstream. Nkemdili screamed, trying to pull him away, but he wrapped his arms around the serpent's body, holding it against himself, refusing to let go. No, she sobbed. What are you doing? Tobechukwu looked at her, blood running down his chest, his eyes already starting to glow gold. What you taught me, he gasped. How to give a damn. The serpent tried to pull away, confused, its instinct screaming at it to release, to choose the willing host over the resisting one. But Tobechukwu held on. You want a vessel? He shouted, his voice distorting, becoming layered, human and reptilian at once. Then take me completely. No more half measures. No more slow feeding. Come all the way in, goddess. Let's end this together. The serpent's eyes widened, understanding the trap too late. Because Tobechukwu wasn't offering himself as a vessel. He was offering himself as a grave. If I can't be free, he whispered, his body beginning to convulse, scales erupting across his skin, his bones cracking and reshaping, then neither can you. And then he fell into the pool. The water exploded upward in a geyser of green light and foam. The serpent, still attached to him, was dragged down, its body thrashing, trying to separate. But Tobechukwu's grip was iron, was madness, was the desperate strength of a man who had finally found something worth dying for. Nkemdili screamed his name, reaching into the water, but invisible hands held her back, the goddess's power repelling her, protecting her from what was happening in the depths. The pool churned and boiled. Lightning split the sky above the forest canopy. Thunder cracked so loud it shook the stones of the ancient shrine. And in the water, Tobechukwu and the serpent became one, not as vessel and passenger, as equals locked in mutual destruction. His human consciousness wrapped around the serpent's essence like chains, binding it, drowning it, pulling it down into the dark places of his soul where even gods feared to go. And the serpent fought back, pumping more of itself into him, trying to overwhelm him, to consume him completely. But Tobechukwu had spent 34 years learning how to contain the unconfinable. And now he used every technique, every moment of resistance, every ounce of will he had developed to survive. He didn't try to push the serpent out. He pulled it deeper in, merged with it completely. And then, with the last spark of his human will, he did the only thing left to do. He drowned them both. The water went still. The light faded. The thunder ceased. And slowly, Tobechukwu's body rose to the surface, face down, motionless, the scales already receding, leaving only pale, unmarked skin. Nkemdili dove into the pool without thinking, pulling him out, dragging him onto the moss-covered ground. She pressed her hands to his chest, feeling for a heartbeat, finding nothing. "No, no, no," she sobbed, beginning compressions, her medical training taking over even as her heart shattered. Don't you dare leave me like this." She breathed into his mouth, counting, pressing, breathing, counting, her tears falling on his face. "Come back," she whispered between breaths. "Please, Tobechukwu, come back." But the forest was silent. The goddess was silent, and the man she loved remained still. She collapsed onto his chest, her sobs tearing through the ancient trees, her grief so profound it seemed to crack the very air. And then she felt it, the faintest flutter against her cheek. A heartbeat. She jerked upright, her hands finding his pulse point, thready, weak. But there. "Tobechukwu!" His eyes fluttered open, brown again, fully, completely human. No gold, no slits. Just the eyes of a tired, broken, free man. "Did it work?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. She laughed through her tears, nodding frantically. Yes, you idiot, you beautiful, stupid idiot. It worked." "The serpent?" She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling for that telltale movement beneath the skin, that sense of something else inhabiting his body. Nothing. Just his heart. Just his breath. Just him. "Gone," she said. "It's gone." He closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his temple. "Then I'm free. You're free." They lay there in the dirt and moss, holding each other as the forest slowly came back to life around them. Birds began to sing again. The oppressive weight in the air lifted. Even the pool of water, previously dark and threatening, now reflected the sky with innocent clarity. The curse was broken. The bargain fulfilled. The serpent destroyed. And for the first time in his entire life, Tobechukwu Okori breathed without the weight of death in his lungs. The village celebrated for 3 days when they returned. News spread like wildfire that the curse was broken, that the darkness had been lifted, that the prodigal son had finally come home for real. Tobechukwu walked through the market and children ran to him instead of away. Old women blessed him instead of avoiding his gaze. Young men shook his hand, feeling no fear, no warning, just the ordinary warmth of human contact. He cried the first time a dog licked his hand. Nkemdili stood by his side through it all, watching him rediscover what it meant to be human, to be touched without killing, to be loved without dread. They were married a month later under the Iroko tree, The same tree that had stood witness to his mother's desperation all those years ago. But now it witnessed joy instead of fear, hope instead of bargaining. The village elder who performed the ceremony was ancient, his voice thin but clear. "What was broken has been mended," he intoned, tying the traditional cord around their wrists. "What was cursed is now blessed. What was death is now life." And when Tobachukwu kissed his bride, there was no hissing, no scales, no gold in his eyes. Just a man loving a woman who had been willing to die for him. Just a woman loving a man who had died to save her. The celebration lasted until dawn, drums echoing through the valley, palm wine flowing, children dancing with abandon. Tobachukwu and Kemdili slipped away before sunrise, walking hand in hand to the river where so much of his torment had begun. They stood at the water's edge, watching the sun paint the surface gold and orange and pink. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. He understood what she meant, afraid that the curse wasn't really gone, afraid that the moment they truly consummated their marriage, the serpent would return. Terrified, he admitted, but more afraid of never knowing, of letting fear steal what we fought for. She squeezed his hand. "Then we face it together." They returned to his mansion as the village still slept, exhausted from celebration. The house was quiet, the staff dismissed for the week, leaving them alone in the vast space. In his bedroom, with morning light streaming through the windows, they came together slowly, carefully, every touch a question, every kiss a test, waiting for the hissing, waiting for the scales, waiting for death, but it never came. There was only breath and warmth and the sacred ordinary miracle of two people becoming one without curse or consequence. When it was over, they lay tangled in sheets, her head on his chest, his arms around her, both of them crying with relief and joy and the overwhelming gratitude of survival. "It's really over," he whispered into her hair. "It's really over," she agreed. And for the first time in 34 years, Tobachukwu Okori slept without nightmares. 3 weeks later, Nkemdili stood in the clinic, examining a child with malaria when she felt it. A sting on her wrist, sharp, quick, like an insect bite. She finished with the patient, washing her hands, thinking nothing of it. Probably a mosquito. God knows there were enough of them, but as she dried her hands, she glanced down at the spot. 2 small marks, perfectly round, perfectly spaced, fang marks. Her breath caught. No. No, it couldn't be. She scrubbed at the marks, but they didn't fade. They seemed to sink deeper into her skin, becoming darker, more defined. Her heart began to race. She thought of Tobachukwu, sleeping peacefully now, finally free, finally human. She thought of the serpent, supposedly destroyed in the depths of that pool. She thought of the goddess, ancient and patient and impossible to truly kill. And she understood. The bargain hadn't been broken. It had simply changed hosts, not through the rituals she had offered, but through touch, through intimacy, through the exact act of love she and Tobachukwu had sealed with their bodies. The serpent hadn't died. It had transferred into her. Nkemdili stood frozen in the clinic, staring at her wrist, feeling for the first time that telltale movement beneath her skin. Subtle, patient, coiling. She could run to Tobachukwu, tell him, ask for help. But what could he do? He had already sacrificed everything to be free. She wouldn't take that from him, wouldn't burden him with the knowledge that the curse had merely shifted, not ended. She thought of the oracle's words, "The serpent must remain bound to flesh." And she thought of her own words at the shrine, "I offer myself." The goddess had taken her up on it after all, just not in the way any of them expected. Nkemdili took a deep breath, pulled down her sleeve to cover the marks, and returned to her patience. If she had to carry this, she would carry it alone. She would not touch Tobechukwu again, would not risk him, would claim illness, exhaustion, anything to keep distance between them until she figured out how to contain what was growing inside her. She was a doctor. She understood isolation, quarantine, sacrifice. She would protect him the way he had protected her. Even if it meant dying slowly from loneliness. Even if it meant watching him live the life she had given him from a distance. Even if it meant becoming the next monster so he could remain human. That night, she stood at her window looking out at the village she had come to heal. And in the reflection of the glass, just for a moment, her eyes flickered gold. 2 months passed. Tobechukwu noticed the change immediately. Nkemdili became distant, careful. She still smiled, still laughed, but she no longer reached for him, no longer invited his touch. At night, she made excuses. Too tired, too much work, too stressed. He tried to be understanding. She had given up so much to save him. Maybe she needed time. But as the weeks turned into months, he began to fear something darker. Maybe she regretted it, regretted him. Regretted binding herself to a man who had brought nothing but death before her. One evening, he found her standing by the river, staring into the water with an expression he knew too well. The expression of someone carrying something they couldn't share. He approached slowly, afraid of spooking her, afraid of the growing chasm between them. Nkemdili. She didn't turn. You should go home, Tobechukwu. Not without you. I'm fine. Just thinking. You're not fine. You haven't been fine for weeks. He stepped closer, his voice gentle but insistent. Talk to me, please. Whatever it is, we can face it together. She finally turned, and in the fading light, he saw it. The exhaustion, the fear, the familiar weight of carrying something monstrous. And he knew. Oh God, he whispered, it's in you. She tried to lie, tried to smile and shake her head and dismiss his concern. But he grabbed her wrist, pulling up her sleeve before she could stop him. The fang marks were still there, darker now, surrounded by a faint pattern of scales that disappeared as soon as he looked directly at them. How long? He asked, his voice breaking. It doesn't matter. How long, Nkemdili? Since the wedding night, she whispered. Since It transferred when we made love. I felt it happen. Felt something move from you into me. Tobechukwu staggered backward, horror and guilt crashing over him like a wave. No, I did this to you. I freed myself by cursing you. You didn't know. That doesn't matter. You saved me and I... He couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't voice the unbearable truth. They stood in silence, the river flowing past them indifferent and eternal. Finally, Nkemdili spoke, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. The goddess was right. The bargain can't be broken, only transformed. The serpent needed a host, and it found one. But maybe, she looked up at him with desperate hope, maybe together we can find a way to truly end it. Not by transferring it, not by drowning it, but by understanding it, by finding what it really wants. What it wants is to feed, Tobechukwu said bitterly, on love, on life, on connection. Maybe, or maybe it wants what all captive things want. She took his hand, intertwining their fingers despite the risk. Freedom. He looked at her, this impossible woman who refused to give up even now, even carrying the weight of a goddess's rage. And he made a promise. Then we'll find it together. A real ending, not a transfer, not a sacrifice, a solution. He pulled her close, holding her despite the danger, despite the faint hissing that had started again in the air around them. I got my freedom through your sacrifice. Now I'll spend every day earning it by fighting for yours." She buried her face in his chest, allowing herself one moment of weakness, one moment of being held. "What if we can't?" she whispered. "What if this is just how it is?" An eternal curse moving from body to body, generation to generation. Tobachukwu tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Then we break the cycle, not by killing ourselves, not by dying heroically, but by living stubbornly, by refusing to let this thing define us, by finding joy in whatever moments we can steal from it." He kissed her forehead gently. "The serpent wants to feed on love? Then we starve it by loving anyway, by choosing each other every single day despite the risk, by being so relentlessly, defiantly human that even a goddess gets bored." Despite everything, Nkemdili laughed. It was a small sound, fragile, but real. "You're insane. I learned from the best." They stood together at the river's edge as night fell. Two people bound by curses and choices, by ancient bargains and modern love. And in the water, the reflection of Nkemdili's eyes flickered gold, just for a moment. But this time, she didn't look away. She stared back at her reflection, at the serpent looking out through her eyes, and she smiled. Not with fear, not with resignation, but with the quiet defiance of a woman who had chosen her chains and would decide for herself when to break them. The river flowed on, carrying the reflection downstream, carrying the story forward into an uncertain future. And somewhere in the depths, the goddess watched and waited, because curses are patient, and love, for all its power, is such a fragile, temporary thing. But what the goddess didn't understand, what no ancient power ever truly grasps, is that fragile things are not weak things, and temporary does not mean meaningless. Sometimes the shortest flames burn the brightest. Sometimes the most fragile loves leave marks that even gods cannot erase. And sometimes the greatest victory is not in defeating darkness, but in refusing to let it make you cruel. Nkemdili looked away from the river, back at Tobachukwu, at this man she had saved and who had saved her in return. This complicated, beautiful, ordinary man. "Let's go home," she said softly. And they walked away from the river together, hand in hand, carrying their curse and their love with equal weight. Because some stories don't end with freedom. Some stories end with choice. And the choice to love, despite the cost, is its own kind of magic. Evil doesn't always hunt you. Sometimes it waits, patient and ancient, in the depths of rivers and the promises of desperate mothers. Sometimes it wears the face of salvation. Sometimes it hides in the body of the one you love, waiting for the moment you finally let your guard down. And sometimes the greatest curse isn't the monster you carry. It's realizing that everyone you love will carry it too. The river flows on. The village sleeps. And in the mansion on the hill, two people hold each other in the darkness, feeling the serpent coil between them, knowing that love is not the cure. Love is the sacrifice we make willingly, again and again and again, until one day perhaps even gods learn mercy, or until the serpent finally consumes everything and there is nothing left to love at all. Tell me in the comments, do you think love is a blessing or the most beautiful curse of all? And if you believe in keeping African stories alive, show some love with a super thanks or by becoming a member. It means more than you know. Until the next story, stay kind, stay human.